What started as a careless joke at a billion-dollar company turned into one of the most chilling true crime cases in Texas. A mechanic who did the impossible, a CEO who made a promise she never thought she'd have to keep, and a dangerous obsession that ended in fire, betrayal, and prison. Was he a monster, or a victim of her arrogance? Stay with me, because this story will keep twisting until the very last moment. In 2017, Houston, Texas, was buzzing with stories about Astrotech Industries, a billion-dollar company that promised to change the future of technology. At the center of it all was Veronica Steele, the company's glamorous yet intimidating CEO. She was the type of leader who never backed down, never admitted weakness, and always seemed to be 10 steps ahead of everyone else. But on one particular evening, at a private company event filled with executives, investors, and journalists, Veronica made a remark that would come back to haunt her. Inside the showroom, beneath bright lights and camera flashes, stood a towering machine, a massive prototype engine designed to revolutionize industrial power. It had cost millions to build, but there was one small problem: it didn't work. The engineers had tried everything, yet the machine remained nothing more than a useless metal giant. As the crowd circled the machine, Veronica smirked, holding a glass of champagne. "Look at this thing," she said, her voice carrying through the room. "We spent a fortune, and it still won't turn on. Honestly, if anyone here can fix it, I'll marry them." The room erupted in laughter. For everyone else, it was just another one of Veronica's bold, sarcastic remarks. The idea of fixing that broken engine seemed so impossible that no one took her seriously. No one, except a man standing quietly at the back. His name was Ethan Cole, a 35-year-old mechanic who had been brought in as a last resort. Unlike the executives in their tailored suits, Ethan looked out of place. He wore a simple work jacket, his hands still marked with grease from earlier repairs. He wasn't a polished engineer or a corporate insider. He was just a man who fixed machines. While the others laughed, Ethan's expression remained serious. He studied the engine closely, his eyes moving across its pipes, wires, and gears as if he could already see the problem inside. When the laughter died down, Ethan spoke for the first time. His voice was calm, steady, and unexpected. "I'll give it a try," he said. The room went silent. Some executives exchanged smirks, others rolled their eyes. But Veronica leaned in with interest. She had just made a joke, but Ethan looked like a man who didn't see it as one. And that moment marked the beginning of a story that would spiral into obsession, betrayal, and crime. Ethan Cole wasn't just another mechanic. People in Houston's underground racing scene whispered about his uncanny ability to fix machines that others had given up on. Airplane engines, rare sports cars, experimental motors. Ethan had touched them all, often working in dim garages with nothing more than basic tools and sheer determination. Some said he had a gift. Others believed it bordered on obsession. When Astrotech handed him access to their broken prototype, even the senior engineers rolled their eyes. The machine wasn't just malfunctioning, it was a disaster. Months of design flaws, overheating circuits, and failed experiments had left it practically dead. But Ethan saw something different. Where others saw failure, he saw a puzzle waiting to be solved. For weeks, he worked alone in the company's underground workshop. Witnesses said he barely ate, barely slept. He scribbled on scraps of paper, drew diagrams across the walls, and spent hours just staring at the engine as though he were listening to it breathe. Late at night, Veronica Steele herself would sometimes appear, her sharp heels clicking against the concrete floor. She expected to find a man covered in oil and confusion. Instead, she found Ethan hunched over the machine, his eyes locked on every moving part. He treated the prototype not as a broken object, but almost like a living thing. She once overheard him whispering, "I know what you need. I'll bring you back." The deeper he went, the stranger it became. He requested unusual parts, scraps of outdated machinery, pieces no engineer would ever think to use. When questioned, Ethan would simply smile and say, "Trust me." After nearly 3 months, it happened. At dawn, the silence of the workshop was broken by a thunderous roar. Sparks lit up the room as the massive engine came alive. Its gears turned flawlessly, stronger than anyone thought possible. For the first time in years, the impossible prototype was working. The company's engineers rushed in, stunned. Investors cheered. and the press soon got wind of the miracle repair. Headlines exploded. Unknown mechanic fixes billion-dollar machine. But not everyone was celebrating. Veronica stood frozen, her champagne night joke echoing in her mind. She had promised something in front of witnesses, and Ethan, with grease on his hands and fire in his eyes, hadn't forgotten. He simply turned to her and said, softly but firmly, "You made a promise." At first, everyone at Astrotech thought Ethan's words were harmless. When he reminded Veronica Steele that she had promised to marry him, laughter once again filled the executive offices. To the wealthy, powerful CEO, it was just a throwaway remark, a cocktail hour joke that had turned into company gossip. But to Ethan, it was something far more serious. In the weeks after the machine's revival, Ethan's behavior began to shift. He no longer came to the company simply to work on repairs. Instead, he lingered around Veronica's office, waiting in the lobby just to catch a glimpse of her. Every morning, a bouquet of flowers arrived at her desk, signed only with 3 haunting words, "Your future husband." At first, Veronica brushed it off. She even joked about it with her assistants. But soon, the gestures escalated. Ethan appeared outside her home late at night, standing by his truck as if he were her private guard. When questioned by security, he calmly explained that he was making sure nothing happened to her. What unsettled Veronica most wasn't just his persistence, it was his knowledge. Ethan seemed to understand every detail of her life. He knew when she left the office, where her car was parked, even the quiet back entrances she thought no one noticed. Then came the incident that turned fear into terror. One morning, Veronica slid into her sleek black car, only to feel the brakes fail as she rolled out of her driveway. She managed to stop the vehicle just in time, narrowly avoiding disaster. When she stepped out, she found a note tucked under the windshield wiper. It read, "Don't run from me." By now, Veronica's polished confidence was cracking. She contacted the police, but without concrete evidence, they couldn't arrest Ethan. His actions were disturbing, but technically not illegal. To her growing horror, Ethan seemed to know this, and he exploited it. When she finally confronted him face to face, demanding he leave her alone, Ethan's response chilled her to the bone. His voice was calm, almost tender, but his words carried a terrifying weight. "I kept my end of the deal. You're mine now. Nothing can change that." Veronica realized she was no longer dealing with a joke gone too far. She was trapped in the crosshairs of a man who believed love was a contract, and obsession was destiny. By the spring of 2018, Veronica Steele was living in constant fear. Every day, she checked over her shoulder. Every night, she double-locked her doors. Ethan Cole's shadow lingered everywhere she went. His flowers, his notes, his unshakable presence. The police had opened a file, but without hard proof of violence, their hands were tied. Veronica, once untouchable in the boardroom, now felt like prey being hunted. It was then that Veronica decided she had only one option left, to fight Ethan on his own ground. If he believed promises mattered more than anything else, she would give him one, and then twist it. She reached out to him directly, something she hadn't dared in weeks. Her message was short and carefully written. "Meet me at the workshop tonight. We'll talk about us." To Ethan, it was the moment he had been waiting for. Witnesses later recalled how he appeared unusually calm that day, even cheerful. He bought a new suit, shaved for the first time in months, and told a neighbor that his life was finally falling into place. To him, Veronica had finally accepted her fate. That night, the workshop was dimly lit, the repaired prototype engine gleaming in the corner like a monument to his obsession. Veronica stood near it, composed but tense. When Ethan walked in, carrying a small velvet box in his pocket, he smiled. "You kept your word," he whispered. But Veronica had prepared something far more dangerous than a wedding vow. For days, she had secretly worked with one of her engineers to tamper with the very machine Ethan had resurrected. The engine was now wired to overload, a death trap hidden beneath polished steel. When Ethan reached for the control panel, Veronica's voice cut through the silence. "Turn it on. Let's see your masterpiece one more time." Oblivious, Ethan obeyed. The machine roared, but within seconds, sparks shot across the floor. Flames burst from the sides as metal screeched and groaned. Ethan's smile faltered. His beloved creation was collapsing before his eyes. Veronica ran for the exit as smoke filled the workshop. Firefighters arrived minutes later to find Ethan unconscious, his suit charred, his hands still clutching the ruined engine. He was alive, but barely. In that fiery trap, the machine that had bound them together was finally destroyed, and Ethan's dream of claiming Veronica as his bride turned into ashes. When Ethan Cole awoke in a hospital bed, his world had already changed. Police officers stood guard at his door, and headlines across Texas screamed of obsession, sabotage, and fire. The mechanic who had once been hailed as a genius was now painted as a dangerous stalker who had terrorized one of the state's most powerful CEOs. But the story was far from simple. In court, prosecutors laid out their case. Ethan had harassed Veronica Steele for months, sabotaged her car, and finally triggered the workshop fire that nearly destroyed Astroteca's crown jewel. They described him as delusional, a man who mistook a passing joke for destiny. Jurors nodded along as they heard of his late-night appearances, the threatening notes, the obsessive gifts. Yet when Ethan's defense attorney rose to speak, the trial took an unexpected turn. He pulled out a piece of paper, fragile, stained with champagne, and written in Veronica's elegant handwriting. It was the napkin. On it were the words she had scrawled at that fateful party months earlier. "Fix this, and I'll marry you." Signed, Veronica Steele. The courtroom gasped. To the defense, this was proof that Ethan wasn't delusional at all. He had believed in her promise because she had put it in writing, even if jokingly. "My client is not a stalker," the lawyer argued. "He is a man betrayed. He did the impossible, and she mocked him for it. Who is truly at fault here?" Suddenly, the narrative shifted. Reporters questioned whether Veronica's arrogance had ignited the tragedy. Some jurors whispered to one another. Could Ethan really be the victim of a cruel game? Veronica, visibly shaken, took the stand. She admitted to the joke, admitted to signing the napkin, but insisted she never meant it seriously. "It was a laugh, nothing more," she said, her voice cracking. But he took it as law. In the end, the jury found Ethan guilty of stalking, harassment, and reckless endangerment. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. But the verdict didn't clear Veronica's reputation. Public backlash forced her to resign as CEO, accused of carelessly toying with lives for amusement. The machine that brought them together lay in ruins, and two lives, one consumed by obsession, the other shattered by pride, were destroyed. And so the haunting question lingers. Was Ethan truly a monster, or was he simply a man who believed in a promise that should never have been made?